Here is square number 10, the fan, the next motif in a Voyage East knit-along. With most or all of your squares finished, you are now ready for the first part of the finishing process, which is joining the squares together. While there are a few different sewing methods, Deborah has used the mattress stitch technique, which we will show you here. In this video, we're going to show you how to put all your squares together by using mattress stitch. You're going to be seaming the side seams together and the top and the bottom together, and we're going to illustrate that in this video. So you need to gather your tools for seaming, and we have a yarn needle, which has a nice large eye, and a nice sharp pair of scissors. Now I'm going to show you mattress stitch seaming two side seams together. But before we do that, I find it easier to pin the edges together to make sure that they match very evenly. So I'll pin the two bottom edges. And in this case, this piece is a little bit shorter, so you want to pull it up a little bit and pin it to the top edge. And then pin another section about a quarter of the way up and another section here. This just kind of helps you keep your side edges straight and making sure that you're not sewing too much on one side than on the other. It's just a nice, easy way to keep it as straight as possible. Then you take a thread, one of the yarns. You can choose any color you want because actually this seaming is invisible on the right side, so you're not going to see the colored strand that you're sewing with, but I've chosen a purple as there's some purple in this square, so that's the yarn I'm choosing. I'm going to start seaming from the bottom to the top. You have to make sure that your squares are all facing the correct direction, and to know what is the top of the square is the bound off edge. Looks like these nice V's along here. So you're going to make sure the knitting's all going in the same direction. So always be sure that, especially on the solid squares, or the self-striping squares, that the cast on, or the bound off edge is always at the top and the cast on edge at the bottom. So we start from the bottom and we're going to go up to the top. Insert the yarn needle from back to front into the corner stitch of the square on the right, leaving a small tail to weave in later, and then into the corner stitch of the square on the left, again back to front, and pull the yarn through. I'm going to take this pin out, get it out of the way, and pull it through. Now you're going to go back and forth between the two squares, and the yarn needle is going to go in between the last two stitches on this square and the first two stitches on the left square. So as you can see, when you might have to lift it up a little bit, you can see this is the outside knit stitch, and it's a little uneven. So you want to find the horizontal strand between this last knit stitch and the second to last knit stitch, and insert your needle into that horizontal strand from back to front and pull it through. You don't need to pull it too tightly yet. Then you go on to the second square on the left, and again, there's your knit stitch on the edge. You're going to go in between these two stitches, find that horizontal strand. Sometimes it's a little hard to find, so you need to pick it up and look for it. There it is. And pull it through. And you're going to go back and forth between the two squares, always pulling through, all the way through, horizontal strand. I'm going to do it a little loosely now and then show you what it should look like. Back and forth. So as you can see, when I pull it out here, when I pull it out, you can see them weaving back and forth. So now what I'm going to do is tighten this seam. So if you hold the 2 squares down here with your left hand and pull this strand, keep pulling it, you'll see how the fabric comes together and it looks like one piece. And that's what's so great about the mattress stitch. And you don't even see this purple strand that you've been using. So I'm going to quickly sew the side seams and come back in a little bit and show you the finished piece. I'm almost to the top of the square, and remember that this right hand square was a little tiny bit shorter than the left hand. So what you need to do is every once in a while go through maybe 2 horizontal strands to the 1 horizontal strand on this side, just to ease it in a little bit. It will not be noticeable in the finishing when you finish it. So I'm going to take you right up to the end. And now you can take this last pin out. And you can see already it's very much even. So now we're almost to the end. Once you get a rhythm going, you can go a little quicker. And just always keep looking at your work to make sure it's remaining even on the same side, because you might have to, if it was really far off, you might have to tear down a little bit and do it again. But it's better to check your work every little bit just to make sure that it's all matching up just fine. And tugging on it again to bury this purple strand almost to the top. And then you do one final stitch. And we have 2 squares sewn together with mattress stitch. An important thing to remember when you're pinning your squares together from the top and the bottom, that they are going in the same direction. That is, the top of the square is the bound off edge, and you can see here on this purple square, the little V's, they look like knit stitches, quite prominent. That is the bound off edge. And the square on the top has a smoother kind of rope-like edge, and that's the cast on edge. So very important. If it's a motif, you can tell the top of the motif easier, but when it's the solid color, you might not be able to tell. And if you're unsure, you could mark the top edge after you bind off if you'd like, if you're not 100% sure. So let's get started with the mattress stitch, joining the squares from the cast on to the bind off edge. I'm going to take this first pin out. Just as in the other seaming, you're going to thread your tapestry needle. Now I'm going to insert my needle under the cast on edge and through the first knit stitch. You can see the V of that stitch. And pull the yarn through. And you need to leave a small end, which you'll seam in later after everything's put together. Then you're going to go to the other side and go underneath the cast on edge and look for that V stitch, knit stitch, and pull it through. And again, this method is just about invisible, just like the other seaming, so that it will hide both of these edges. You're going to alternate going underneath a knit stitch on the top square and underneath the next knit stitch on the bottom square, pulling the yarn through. And you're going to pull it a little bit tightly, but not too tightly. underneath a knit stitch on one side, and underneath the knit stitch on the other side. It's kind of helpful to hold the fabric, hold in your hand like this so that you can really see where that next stitch is. Under the next V, and make sure that that yarn doesn't make a knot there. So you're weaving back and forth between the two squares. So I'm going to finish up this square and show you the finished product. So here we have the two squares seamed completely from top to bottom. And let me just show you the wrong side. As you can see here, it has hidden the cast on and bound off edges underneath. It makes a little bit of a thick seam there. So what I've done is did a little bit of light steaming right on the top with the linen towel over, and lightly steamed it to make it a little bit flatter. But it's nice and neat, and don't forget to weave in your ends. So there you have seaming the two squares top to bottom.